What's your call sign, sweetheart? Every real operator's got one. Go on, say it for the table. Staff Sergeant Travis Kowalski said it loud, so the tables behind him would hear, and they did. 30 men laughed on cue. The sound rolled down the Chow line like a dropped tray, sharp, and then gone. The woman he said it to did not turn around. She stood 4 places back in the line, a plastic tray balanced flat on one hand, and she moved only her eyes. Not her head, not her shoulders. Just her eyes. Once, left to right, the way a person reads a room they have already decided they may need to leave. Then she looked forward again at the steam trays and the line of Marines shuffling toward the meatloaf and the gravy and the pale green beans, and she waited her turn. She had eaten in worse rooms than this. She had eaten standing up in the dark, with the safety off and her back against cold stone, and the sound of other people's boots overhead. She had eaten cold rations at 800 meters, with the wind trying to take the wrapper out of her fingers. A mess hall at 1200 hours did not frighten her. 300 Marines and a smell of burnt coffee did not frighten her. Kowalski did not frighten her. He did not know that yet. That was the whole problem with him, and it was not going to be her problem for long. The mess hall was loud in the ordinary way. Trays clattering, the metal scrape of serving spoons, a television bolted high in one corner, playing a game with the sound off. 300 Marines feeding in shifts, the line never quite empty, the steam rising off the trays and fogging the sneeze guards. It was an ordinary room, on an ordinary base, on an ordinary Tuesday in July. The woman wore utilities that had been washed too many times. The pattern had gone soft. There was no rank on her collar, no name tape over the pocket, no unit patch on the shoulder. The fabric was clean but sterile, stripped, the way a uniform looks when someone has spent a very long time somewhere. They were not allowed to be identified. To a Marine who did not know how to read that, she looked like a nobody, a new transfer, a contractor, somebody's admin help, a woman holding a tray. Kowalski knew how to read exactly one thing, and it was weakness, and he thought he had found some. "I'm talking to you," he said. He stepped out of his own place in the line, unhurried, a big man who filled a doorway and knew it, and he planted himself half a step into her space. "New girl, you got a call sign or not? Come on, every hard case in here's got one. Reaper, ghost, something. What's yours?" She looked at him then. She let him have her eyes, flat and gray and unhurried, and she gave him one word. "Duarte." "Duarte," he grinned at the table nearest him. "That's not a call sign. That's a last name. That's what it says on your mail. Try again." "That's the name," she said. The table laughed again, smaller this time, waiting to see how far he would take it. Kowalski liked an audience the way some men like a drink. He turned back to her and looked her up and down, the sterile utilities, the soft-washed fabric, the boots that were older than his stripes. "Let me guess," he said. "Supply. Chow Hall detail. You wander in here from the laundry? Because you're standing in a Marine chow hall wearing a uniform with nothing on it, and that's a funny thing to do." "I'm waiting on in-processing," she said. 2 words and a fact. No more. She turned her tray a quarter turn on her palm, squared it, and looked past him at the line. 40 feet away, against the far wall, an older man stopped chewing. Master Gunnery Sergeant Hollis Barnett was 55 years old and had spent 32 of those years in the Marine Corps, and in that time he had learned to trust exactly one thing more than paperwork, which was the way a person held still. Most people did not know how to be still. They fidgeted. They shifted their weight. They looked at their phones. When a room got loud, they got louder, or they shrank. The woman in the line did neither. She stood inside the noise like a stone stands inside a river. She had taken the one glance a person takes when they walk into a room. Exits, count, angles. And then she had put it away, and now she simply waited. Economical, weightless, her free hand loose at her side, and her strong hand on the tray. Barnett watched her stack a napkin and a fork and a cup on the tray without once looking down at them, her fingers finding each thing by memory, and something very old in the back of his skull sat up. He had seen that stillness before. He had seen it on people whose names were classified and whose graves, if they had them, had the wrong dates on them. He set his fork down on his tray. He did not pick it back up. Kowalski, who read weakness and nothing else, saw a woman not fighting back and decided he had won. He always decided that. He clapped a hand on the shoulder of the corporal beside him and said something low, and the table laughed, and the line moved, and the woman named Duarte took one step forward with it and did not look back at him. She had a call sign. She had earned it in a place she was not allowed to name, on a night she did not talk about, from a man who had died, so that she and 11 other people could walk out of a building. The call sign was not a joke, and it was not for the table, and Kowalski was going to hear it before the day was over. He just did not know it yet. The line kept moving, and then it stopped, because a cart came apart. It happened the way these things happen, fast and stupid and loud. A junior Marine pushing a supply cart along the back of the serving line hit a wet patch on the tile, and the cart slewed sideways and tipped. A stack of ration crates went over. A metal case of ammunition count paperwork and a plastic bin of range documents skated across the floor and fetched up against the leg of the serving counter. Cans rolled. A crate cracked. The whole back of the line jammed as Marines pulled their feet back, and somebody swore, and the corporal who had been pushing the cart froze with both hands out, watching a morning's worth of accountability slide under 300 pairs of boots. Duarte set her tray down on the rail. She did it without hurry. Then she stepped out of the line, crossed the 4 feet to the fallen cart, and put it back together. She did not do it the way a helpful person does it, grabbing at the nearest thing. She did it the way a person does it, who has loaded and unloaded weight under a clock her whole adult life. She took the heaviest crate first, the one holding the whole leaning stack in place, and she set her feet and lifted with her legs and set it square. Then the next heaviest, then the light bin. 3 moves. The stack stood. The cart stood. The whole thing had gone from disaster to solved in the time it took Kowalski to lean back and enjoy it. The corporal gathered the scattered paper with shaking hands. "Master Guns is going to have my hide," he said, to no one. "The round count's due at 1300, and it's all over the floor." Duarte crouched, picked up the ammunition count manifest, and looked at it for the length of one breath. 240, she said. "You're short 9. The corporal blinked at her. "Ma'am?" Line 4. It says 240 issued, 231 returned. "You're short 9 rounds. That's not a spill problem. That was already wrong before the cart went over." She handed him the clipboard, face up, her thumb resting on line 4, and stood. Barnett was already there. He had crossed the room without anyone noticing, the way a heavy man learns to move when he has spent a career, not wanting to be the loudest thing in a space, and he took the clipboard from the corporal and ran his eye down the same column. His jaw worked once. "She's right," he said quietly. "Line 4's short 9. Corporal, who signed for line 4 this morning?" The corporal's face changed. He looked at the clipboard, and then he looked, without meaning to, across the mess hall at Kowalski's table, and then he looked at the floor. I'll find out, Master Guns." Barnett handed the clipboard back and turned his attention fully to the woman. Up close, she was older than the table had assumed. 40, and change, with lines at the corners of her eyes that came from squinting into distances. She had already stepped back from the cart, back toward her tray on the rail, disengaging, done, wanting nothing. That was a fast read, Barnett said. It was a wrong number, she said. They stand out. 2 things, a fact and a reason. Nothing extra. No, how did you know? No, you're welcome. No anything. She picked her tray back up and turned it a quarter turn on her palm, and squared it and waited to rejoin the line. Barnett looked at her watch. It was a plain black watch, and she wore it with the face turned to the inside of her wrist, where a person wears it when they do not want the glass to catch light at the wrong moment. He looked at the sterile collar with no rank on it. He looked at the way she had lifted the crate. Legs, not back. The load kept close, no wasted motion, and he felt the old thing in the back of his skull come all the way awake. Precision is a language. Some men hear it and understand they are standing near something they should be careful about. Kowalski was not one of those men. From his table, he had watched the whole thing. The spill, the woman fixing it, the master guns crossing the room, and he had decided that the new girl was a show-off. "Look at that," he said, loud again, to his table. "New girl thinks she's hot stuff. Reads a clipboard, saves the day. Somebody give her a ribbon." He grinned. "You want a medal, sweetheart? We got a whole drawer of them in supply. Oh, wait. That's your section, isn't it?" Duarte did not answer. She rejoined the line. Barnett watched her go, and then he wrote a single word on the back of his own hand with a pen from his breast pocket, and he stepped out through the side door into the July heat to make a telephone call. The word on the back of his hand was a name. It was not the name Kowalski thought he had. By the time the line had cleared and the tables were full, the woman had a nickname, and it was not Duarte. Kowalski coined it, because Kowalski coined all of them. "Tray girl," he said, when she carried her food past his table looking for a place to sit, and the men around him picked it up because it cost them nothing and kept them on the right side of the loudest man in the room. It went table to table the way these things go, faster than truth ever moves, and by the time she had crossed half the mess hall, 3 separate corners had already used it on her. She found an open seat at the end of a long table near the wall. 2 junior Marines got there first, not because they wanted it, but because Kowalski was watching, and they slid into it and spread their trays and their elbows wide and looked at her and grinned, blocking it, waiting to see what she would do. She did nothing. She stood for 1 second, unbothered, and then she simply chose a different seat, the corner one, the one nobody wanted, the one with its back flat to the wall and a clean line of sight to both doors. She sat. She squared her tray. She began to eat, unhurried, economical, and she watched the room the way other people watch television. One Marine did not laugh. Lance Corporal Toby Willis was 19 years old and 8 months out of the School of Infantry, and he had noticed 3 minutes earlier that when the cart went over, the woman's gear bag had been kicked under a table in the shuffle. He picked it up now. He carried it over to the corner, and he set it down beside her chair, quietly, and he said the only thing his mother and the Marine Corps had both taught him to say. "Ma'am." Duarte looked up at him. It was the first time all day her expression had moved, and it moved only a little, the smallest easing at the corner of her mouth. "Thank you," she said. Willis nodded and started back toward his own seat, and Kowalski caught him halfway. "Look at Willis," Kowalski said, delighted. "Carrying the lady's purse. You sweet on tray girl, Willis? You want to walk her to laundry after?" The table howled. Willis's ears went red. He sat down and stared at his food and said nothing, and the laughter moved on to the next thing, the way it does. In the corner, the woman took a small green notebook out of her breast pocket. She did not open it in any obvious way. She rested her hand on it, on the table, and her pen moved a little under her palm, and to anyone watching it looked like a woman resting her hand while she ate. She wrote the time. She wrote a description of a supply short count and the corner it had walked to. She wrote 3 names she had heard called across the tables in the last 20 minutes, and beside one of them, the loud one, she wrote nothing at all yet, because she did not have enough yet, and she was a patient person. She had learned patience in the only school that teaches it, which is the one where impatience gets people killed. She wore her watch turned in. She sat where she could see the door. She cleared the food from her tray and stacked the tray and the cup and the fork in the same 3-part motion every time, the same one, mechanical, so that her hands did the small work and her eyes stayed free for the room. Everything about her was arranged so that nothing would ever surprise her. The room had decided she was nobody. The room was very sure. The room was wrong. And if you have ever been in a room that was that sure and that wrong, if you have ever been written off by people who could not see what was standing right in front of them, then stay where you are, because this is the part you came for. And if you want to see how far wrong 300 people can be, take 1 second and subscribe, because it is about to turn all the way over. Kowalski did not stop at a nickname. Men like Kowalski never stop at a nickname, because a nickname is a small win, and a small win only makes them hungry for a bigger one. He found his bigger one in paperwork. He walked over to the duty non-commissioned officer that afternoon, a tired sergeant named Pace who wanted nothing except to finish his shift, and Kowalski leaned on the duty desk and told him a story. There was a woman in the Chow hall, he said. No rank on her collar, no name tape. Nobody knew her. She'd been hanging around the serving line where the accountability crates come through, real interested in the supply paperwork, asking questions, and then a round count came up short. He wasn't saying anything. He was just saying, in this climate, with the inspections coming, didn't somebody ought to write that up? Unauthorized personnel in a controlled space, just to be safe. Just so it was on the record that Staff Sergeant Kowalski had flagged it, being diligent, being squared away. It was a beautiful piece of work, and he knew it. He had taken the one thing that made her suspicious to a fool, the sterile uniform, and he had turned it into a security concern. He had taken the moment she'd been right about the short count and reframed it as the moment she'd been too interested in the crates. He had built himself a little monument to his own vigilance out of her silence, and the best part, the part that made him grin all the way back to his table, was that she would look worse on paper for having been correct. Sergeant Pace, who did not want a problem, made a small one anyway, because that is what the form is for. He found the woman in the corner, and he was polite about it. He asked to see her identification. She did not have any, not the kind he was asking for. Her wallet held a base access card with a barcode, and no photograph and no rank, the kind issued to people whose presence is arranged through channels the duty desk does not see. She handed it over, calm, and when he frowned at it, she gave him a telephone number. "Call it in," she said. "I'll wait." She said it the way you would say the sky is up there. No edge, no plea. She sat with her hands folded on the table, and her pulse did not move, and her eyes went once, left door, right door, and came back to rest on the tired sergeant's face. And she waited. She had been asked for identification she was not carrying by design more times than this man had been on the base. It was not an accident that she carried nothing. It was the point. Pace took the number back to the duty desk and dialed it, because the form told him to, and across the mess hall, Kowalski watched the whole thing with the deep contentment of a man who has arranged for someone else to be humiliated on his behalf. He caught Barnett's eye across the room. Barnett, who was still there, who had been there the whole time, sitting at his table with a cup of coffee going cold in front of him. And Kowalski lifted his chin at the woman being questioned, as if to say, "See, Master Guns? Told you. Nobody." Barnett did not lift his chin back. He watched the duty sergeant dial the number, and he watched the woman sit still under an accusation the way most people cannot sit still under a compliment. And he thought about the word he had written on the back of his hand 2 hours ago, and he said nothing because it was not his to say. It was hers. She would say it when she was ready, and not 1 second before, and 32 years had taught Hollis Barnett that the most dangerous people in any room are the ones who are in no hurry at all. At the duty desk, Sergeant Pace's call connected. He gave the woman's name and the barcode number and the situation. Unauthorized personnel, no rank, no tape, flagged by a staff sergeant. He said it in the bored voice of a man reading a form. The voice on the other end of the line stopped him 3 words in and asked him to repeat the barcode. He read it again. There was a silence. And then, faintly, tinny through the desk phone's cheap speaker, Sergeant Pace heard a chair scrape, and a man come to his feet. And the voice that came back was a different voice entirely, low and fast and awake, and it asked him one question, and it was not a question about a Chow Hall complaint. Pace hung up slowly. He looked across the mess hall at the woman in the corner. He did not walk back over to her. He also did not tell Staff Sergeant Kowalski a single thing about the call. Master Gunnery Sergeant Barnett caught Kowalski by the tray return an hour later, when the mess hall was between meals and half empty, and for the first time all day, someone stood in Kowalski's space instead of the other way around. Barnett was not a big talker. He put his empty tray on the rail, and he stood there, gray and solid, and he waited until Kowalski looked at him, and then he said it plainly, the way you say a thing you mean. "Son, walk it back." "Master Guns? The woman, the paperwork, the name you gave her." Barnett's voice was low and even, no heat in it, which was worse than heat. "Walk it back. Go find Sergeant Pace and tell him you were mistaken. Do it before end of day." Kowalski laughed. It came out easy, because he had spent all day being the loudest man in the room, and he did not know how to stop. "Come on, Master Guns, she's a nobody. No rank, no tape. Sitting in the corner, writing in a little notebook like a substitute teacher. I did the base a favor. If she's legit, the call clears her, and no harm done. If she's not," he spread his hands, "then I caught something. Either way, I look good. You keep saying nobody." Barnett looked at him for a long moment. "I've been in this corps since before you could spell it. I have met a lot of people, and I'm going to tell you something for free, and you can do what you want with it." He leaned in half an inch. "Some people you don't get to find out about twice. You understand me. You get exactly one chance to be wrong about who they are. She fixed your cart, she caught your short count, and she sat there and ate her lunch while you built a case against her, and she never once raised her voice because she didn't need to. That's not a nobody. That's somebody who has been somebody so long she forgot it's supposed to show." Kowalski's grin flickered, just for a second, and then he got it back. "You're getting soft, Master Guns," he said. "It's a Chow Hall. It's not that deep." Barnett looked at him the way you look at a man standing in a road who cannot hear the truck. Then he picked his cap up off the rail and walked out, and he did not argue, because arguing with Kowalski was a thing you did once, and then never again, having learned it was like arguing with weather. Outside, in the shade of the mess hall wall, Barnett took out his phone and made the second call of the day. Not the duty desk, a number he had carried in his own head for 20 years, from back when he had run a schoolhouse and taught tradecraft to young men and women who went on to places he was never told about, and came back changed, or did not come back at all. The man who answered had been one of his students, a long time ago. He was a colonel now. Barnett described what he had watched. The stillness, the one glance, and then the putting away of the glance, the watch-worn face-in, the way she lifted a crate, the short count she'd read off a clipboard in one breath, the sterile utilities, no rank, no tape, waiting on in-processing. He described a woman who had walked into a Marine chow hall like it was the safest place she had stood in a year and treated 300 Marines like weather she could see coming. The colonel on the other end went very quiet. "Hollis," he said, when Barnett finished. "Did she say a name? Did she give anyone a name?" "Just Duarte," Barnett said. "That's all. Duarte." The silence on the line stretched out so long, Barnett thought the call had dropped. Then the colonel said, in a voice that had lost all its ease, "Stay with her. Do not let anything happen to her before I get there. We have been looking for that officer for 6 days. And you are going to want to know what call sign is worth a colonel dropping everything and driving across a base at speed. What name a woman can carry so quietly that 30 years of a master gunnery sergeant's instincts light up like a flare when he sees it walk through a door. Stay with me, because you are about to hear it said out loud in a crowded room. And if you have been enjoying this, take 1 second and subscribe to Honor Tales, because the reveal is close now, and you do not want to miss the sound it makes when it lands." That night, in a bare, transient room with a single window and a bed she had not yet slept in, Lieutenant Colonel Camille Duarte sat on the floor with her back against the frame and turned her wrist over in the lamplight. There were 2 small letters inked on the inside of it, low, where a watch band would cover them. E and C. She had put them there herself, badly, with a borrowed needle, in a place with no name, 10 years ago, so that she would carry them out even if she carried out nothing else. The call sign was not a nickname. She had never chosen it. It had been given to her the way the important things are always given. Not asked for, not earned in a classroom, but hung on her by other people on the worst night of her life because of what she did and what it cost. It was a debt with a name on it. She wore it the way you wear a scar. She was 43 years old. She had been commissioned into the Marine Corps at 22 in the summer of 2005, and she had been a good officer and then a very good one. And in 2011, at 28, she had walked into the selection pipeline that most people wash out of, and she had not washed out. She had become a raider. She had gone to the places the Marine Corps sends the people it cannot afford to lose and loses anyway. And on a night in 2016, at 33, in a compound she was not allowed to describe, she had earned the name that a staff sergeant had asked her to say as a joke. She closed her eyes and let herself see it, because she only let herself see it when she was alone. 11 hostages, a collapsing timeline. The intelligence had been wrong about the count and wrong about the timing, and by the time the stack was on the wall, the whole thing was coming apart in her hands. She was the ground force commander. It was her call. Push or pull. She had a doorway full of hostages on one side, and a hallway going bad on the other, and 11 lives, and her own team's lives, balanced on a decision she had 4 seconds to make. She pushed. She said the word into the net, the single hard word that meant everyone moves now. And they moved. And it worked. And it worked because Sergeant Elias Crane put his own body across a doorway so the stack could flow past the angle that would have cut them down. He was 27 years old. He held the door. 11 hostages came out into the dark, and off that objective, and home to families who never learned his name. The team came out. Crane did not come out the way he went in. She had gone back for him. She always went back. She had carried what there was to carry, and it was on that walk, with the weight of him, and the night breaking apart around her, and the radio a wall of noise, that a voice she trusted had set her call sign over the net for the first time, half a curse and half a prayer, and it had stuck to her forever after. Mayhem 9, because of what the night had been, because of what she had done to bring them out. People thought a call sign was a costume, something you picked because it sounded hard. She had met men who workshopped theirs, tried 3 or 4 on for the sound, went by Reaper for a month until it stopped fitting. Hers had cost a life. Every time she heard it, she heard the doorway, and the 4 seconds, and the flat, awful arithmetic of 11 for 1. And she carried it the way you carry the name of a debt you will be paying until the day you go into the ground yourself. That was why she had not set it for the table. Not out of pride. You do not hand a thing like that to a man who thinks it is a joke. You do not spend it on laughter. You keep it turned inward, against the pulse, with the 2 small letters, where the light cannot get at it. And there had been one more, a teammate on the far side of the compound, working an angle alone, call sign Ronan, who had gone off the net in the last 3 minutes and never come back on. They had searched. They had searched for weeks. They had listed him missing, and then presumed killed. And she had signed the letter herself, and she had never, not once, in 10 years, entirely believed it. There was no body. There is a particular kind of grief that has no floor under it, and she had been standing on it for a decade. She opened her eyes. She turned her wrist so the 2 small letters faced inward, toward her own pulse, the way she wore the watch, the way she wore everything that mattered, hidden, close, load kept tight to the body. She had come home 6 days ago and the system had lost her in transit, the way the system does, and she had ended up here, in a chow hall, in a bare room, waiting on paperwork, while somewhere on this base a colonel who had spent 6 days looking for her did not yet know she was 1 building away. She was tired in a way sleep does not fix, but she was also, for the first time in a long time, almost amused. A staff sergeant had asked her to say her call sign for the table. Tomorrow, she thought, and turned off the lamp. Tomorrow the paperwork would clear, and she would put her rank back on, and this small, loud man and his small, loud table would learn what the word nobody costs when you spend it on the wrong person. The trap she did not know she was already standing inside had been closing all day. She would not have to spring it. Kowalski was going to do that himself. He did it at the next day's noon meal in front of everyone because he could not help himself. She was in the chow line again. 1 more day of sterile utilities. 1 more day of waiting. And Kowalski had spent the morning being told by 2 different people to leave it alone, and being told to leave a thing alone was, for a man like him, the same as being dared. He came down the line loud, riding the previous day's laughter, and he stepped into her path at the exact spot where the trays came off the rail, and he blocked her, chest out, grinning to the room. "There she is," he announced. "Tray girl. You get your call sign figured out yet? Or you still just Duarte from laundry?" She stopped. She held her tray flat on one hand and looked at him and said nothing, and the nothing was so complete that it made him louder. "I asked you a question." He reached out and put 2 fingers on the edge of her tray and tipped it. Not a bump. A choice. He tipped her tray out of her hand, deliberately, so the food went across the floor in a long, ugly smear, and he laughed while it fell, and he laid his hand flat against her shoulder and gave her a small shove backward to sell it to the table. A hand. Laid on her. In front of 40 witnesses and 2 cameras and a master gunnery sergeant already coming up out of his chair. She did not fall. She did not step back. Her balance simply reset, the way water resets, and she stood exactly where she had been standing, and she looked down at the food on the floor and then up at him. And for the first time in 2 days, she smiled. It was a small smile. It was certain. It was the smile of a person who has been handed, unasked, the one thing she needed, and it did not reach anywhere near her eyes. "Okay," she said. One word. She looked deliberately at the camera in the corner of the ceiling. She looked at Barnett, who was on his feet now, and moving. She looked at Lance Corporal Willis, who had gone white. She was reading the room the way she had read it the whole time, but now she was reading it for a different reason, because a hand had been laid on her in front of witnesses, and that changed what the room was. It was not a chow hall anymore. It was probable cause. Kowalski, riding high, did not read any of it. He saw a woman who had let him tip her tray and shove her and do nothing, and he took it for the final proof of everything he had decided about her. He turned to go back to his table and collect his laughter. Willis stepped in front of him. The boy did not say anything. He just put himself between the staff sergeant and the woman, 19 years old, and terrified, and doing it anyway. And Kowalski, annoyed, put a hand out to move him. And that shove, the one meant to clear a Lance Corporal out of the way, was the last thing Staff Sergeant Travis Kowalski did before the doors at the end of the mess hall opened. He was laughing when they opened. He never understood, in the 2 seconds he had left, to understand things on his own terms, that he had just handed her the entire room. The doors opened, and the temperature of the mess hall changed before anyone knew why. 3 men came in at a walk, not a rush. A walk, the unhurried, ground-eating walk of people who have never once had to run to be taken seriously. 2 of them wore the plain, hard look of raiders. The third was a colonel. His name was Dean Whitfield. He was 49 years old, and he had been driving base roads for 6 days with a photograph and a service record and a growing fear. And he came through the chow hall doors and stopped, and his eyes went across 300 Marines and found the one in the corner with the sterile collar and the tray on the floor at her feet. Master Gunnery Sergeant Barnett came to attention so hard his chair fell over behind him. The clatter died. It did not fade. It died, table by table, as 300 Marines felt something move through the room and turned to look. And the last sound in the mess hall was a single spoon set down on a metal tray. And then there was nothing. Colonel Whitfield crossed the floor. He walked past Kowalski without seeing him. Kowalski was a piece of furniture now, a thing in the way. And he stopped 6 feet from the woman with the food at her feet. And he did the thing that undid the entire room. He came to attention, and he saluted her, and he said her name. MAYHEM 9. His voice carried the length of the silent hall. "Ma'am, we've been looking for you since your bird landed. The whole element's been turning the base over for 6 days." He held the salute. "It is very good to see you, Colonel." The name went across the room like a change in air pressure. It reached Staff Sergeant Kowalski last, the way the truth always reaches the loudest man. Last, and it hit him in stages, and every stage was visible on his face. First confusion, a frown, a half-formed word. Colonel. Mayhem, what? Then disbelief, a small shake of the head. No, she's the laundry. She's the tray. No. Then recognition. The sterile uniform, the caught short count, the stillness, the number she read in one breath, the master guns crossing the room, the duty call nobody told him about, all of it arriving at once and rearranging into a single unbearable shape. And then, last, horror. The pure white horror of a man who has spent 2 days laying his hand on the one person on this base he should have been unable to find, in the dark, with a map. His tray left his hands. He did not throw it down. His fingers simply stopped working, the way fingers do when the blood leaves them, and the tray tipped and fell and hit the deck with a flat metal crash that was, in that silence, the loudest sound any of them had heard all day. Food across the floor, his food, now, next to hers. He stood in it and did not move. Lieutenant Colonel Camille Duarte looked at Colonel Whitfield and let him hold the salute for exactly as long as courtesy required, and then she returned it, unhurried, economical, no wasted motion, and she said the only thing she said in that whole long moment. "Took your time." And 300 Marines, who had spent a day and a half watching a staff sergeant call this woman Tray Girl, stood up. They did not do it on an order. There was no order. They did it the way a tide comes in, table by table, chairs scraping, boots finding the floor, 300 Marines coming to their feet for the woman in the corner, because the whole room had just learned in the space of 4 seconds exactly how wrong it had been, and this was the only way it had to say so. Some of them had laughed the day before. Most of them had. They had passed the nickname table to table, or they had heard it and said nothing, which in a room is the same as passing it. And now they stood, and the standing was not just for her. It was for the small, cold shame of having been so certain. Every one of them had looked at a sterile uniform and a woman eating alone in a corner and read the whole story off the surface, and every one of them had read it exactly backward. And the only cure a Marine has for that particular feeling is to come to his feet and hold still and hope the woman understands what the standing is trying to say. Whitfield's aide stepped forward with a folder, and he did not lower his voice, because there was no longer any reason to. He read 2 documents side by side. The first was a security complaint filed the previous afternoon by Staff Sergeant Travis Kowalski, alleging unauthorized personnel near a controlled supply space. The second was a supply manifest. Line 4, flagged the previous day by the same personnel the complaint named, a short count. 9 rounds, the same 9 rounds. Barnett, standing at attention by his fallen chair, finally let himself smile. 2 raiders crossed the room and stood on either side of Kowalski, 1 at each elbow, and they did not touch him because they didn't need to. He had stopped being a problem the moment his tray hit the floor. He was walked out of the mess hall through 300 standing Marines, past the woman he had called Tray Girl, and he could not find, anywhere in his whole loud body, a single word. It came apart fast after that, the way these things do once the first thread pulls. The short count Colonel Duarte had read off a clipboard in one breath was not a spill and not an accident. It was a thread, and when the command element pulled it, the whole ugly sweater came undone. Line 4 had been short for weeks. So had other lines, in small amounts, spread out, careful, the kind of theft that hides in the rounding. And every time the numbers should have surfaced, a report had been filed that buried them. A security note here, a diligent flag there, a paper trail that made the person asking questions look like the problem, and made the man filing the paper look squared away. The reports were all beautiful. They were all lies. And they were all, every one, signed by the same loud hand. Staff Sergeant Kowalski had not been running a clique. He had been running cover. The Chow Hall dominance, the nicknames, the way he made sure he was the loudest man in every room, it had all been the same instinct pointed at the same purpose. Control the room. Control who gets laughed at. Control who gets believed. And nobody counts the crates while they are busy watching you perform. He had built a small kingdom out of intimidation and false paperwork, and it had worked for a long time. Right up until the afternoon, he tipped his tray at a woman who read a wrong number, the way other people read a stop sign. 2 of his juniors flipped inside the hour. They were 19 and 20, and they had gone along because going along was easier and safer than the alternative. And the second the alternative walked through the doors, wearing an eagle on its collar, easier and safer. Changed sides. The diversion ledger surfaced. The custody paperwork was drawn up. And this time, the arrest wasn't decorative. It was earned, line by line, count by count. A real crime with real victims documented in the boring, beautiful language of a supply manifest. And it would hold. Here is the thing this story keeps trying to tell you, and it is worth staying for. The loud man did not lose because someone louder walked in. He lost because someone patient had been in the room the whole time, keeping her voice down, wearing her watch turned in, writing 3 names in a green notebook, and waiting for him to hand her the 4th. The dangerous person in the room is almost never the one performing danger. It is the one who has nothing to prove. If that lands for you, if you have ever been the quiet one who got written off, do me a favor and subscribe to Honor Tales, because that is the whole reason this channel exists. There was a smaller moment, later, that mattered more than the arrest. Colonel Whitfield and Master Gunnery Sergeant Barnett found Lance Corporal Toby Willis where he had gone to be invisible, at the end of a corridor, still a little white around the mouth. Barnett put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You slid her bag back," Barnett said. "Yesterday, when it was safer to laugh, you said ma'am, and you slid her bag back. And today, you stepped in front of a staff sergeant twice your size, with nothing in your hands but nerve." He squeezed once. "You were the only one who passed the test, son. You just didn't know it was one." Whitfield told the boy some things then about what doors were open to a Marine who did the right thing when the right thing was expensive, and Willis listened with the stunned expression of someone being handed a future he had not known was on the table. And that is where his part of this story turns, upward, in a corridor, with 2 men who had seen everything telling him the one thing that is always true and almost never said out loud. Somebody was watching, and it counted. Dusk came down over the base, slow and gold. Colonel Camille Duarte stood alone outside the transient quarters with her rank back on her collar, an eagle where the sterile fabric had been, and the day's noise behind her. She turned her wrist over out of habit and looked at the 2 small letters against her pulse. EC. She had gotten 11 people off an objective 10 years ago, and she had never once stopped counting the one she could not. That arithmetic does not resolve. You just carry it, turned inward, close to the body. Load kept tight. Her phone lit in her hand. It was a number she did not know, from a place the map calls quiet. The message was 3 words and a single mark. A greeting, an old one, a coded thing that exactly one person in the world had ever used with her, a thing she had signed a letter 10 years ago swearing was gone. She read it once, she read it again. Her thumb did not move. Somewhere behind her a chow hall was being emptied, and a loud man was in custody, and a boy had been handed his future, and none of it existed anymore, because on the small screen in her hand was a name she had buried without a body, and a place it should not have come from, and a single line asking her to come. Ronan. She looked out at the gold light going down over the base, and for the first time in 10 years, the floorless grief had a floor under it. And it was not relief, and it was not peace. It was the beginning of something with her name on it. Her real name, the one Kowalski had asked her to say for the table. She turned the wrist inward, and she went to pack. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.